Hello, in this video we're going to start setting up our Xcode project and we're going to focus on setting up our UI. Now we're going to add our image assets to the project, we're going to add a background, we're going to set up the app so that it displays in landscape orientation, and we're also going to add something called a collection view so that we can start displaying things in a grid layout. Alright, so let's dive in. So we're going to start by creating a brand new Xcode project. Go ahead and create a brand new project like that. And under iOS, choose Single View App as the starting point. You can call the product name anything you want. I'm going to call it Match App. And the important thing though is to make sure your language is set to Swift and that these things are unchecked, just like I have here. We're going to choose Next, and then we are going to save this project I've got a special project folder. You can save it wherever you want. Just make sure you remember where it is. Uncheck source control and go ahead and create it. Alright, so we've got our brand new project. The first order of business is to add our graphic assets into the project. So right below this lesson, you're going to find a link to download all of the graphic assets. Go ahead and do that and then unzip that zip file. It's going to contain a whole bunch of graphic images, the card back, the background, all of the card images, and for each of those, there's going to be 3 different sizes. You'll also find an icon folder. This is the app icon. We're not going to add that just yet. So in Xcode, I want you to go into your assets library where it's going to contain all of the graphic assets for your project. And then go ahead and highlight all the stuff from the back of the card to card 13. So that should be all of it. And then just drag that over here. So Xcode is going to be smart enough to organize them and group them based on the asset names. So you should have background card 1 all the way to card 13, and each of them should have 3 sizes. Next up, let's go into the storyboard. Now it shows me this app in portrait view, but our app is going to operate in landscape view. So this is a good chance to actually restrict the app to only operate in landscape mode. The way we can do that is go back to the project properties, clicking this root node, and then under general, under deployment info, you can see device orientation. All we have to do is uncheck portrait, and by doing that, we're going to restrict that app to only being displayed in landscape left and landscape right. All right, so let's go back to the storyboard. And it's still showing it in portrait view, but that's fine because we can click View As and change the orientation. Now this is just how you're viewing the view and the storyboard right here. It doesn't actually change the way your app operates. So what we did here in the project properties, this is what's important. When you actually launch the app in the simulator and on your device, this is what's going to take effect. What we're setting here in the View As is just how we're viewing it as right now. So changing it to landscape orientation like this for now is going to make it easier for us to add all the elements we need. All right, so let's make some space. You can always hide the file navigator, remember? You can always hide this inspector, and you can also use the shortcuts, the keyboard shortcuts. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is add the background to the view. So we're going to open up our object library by clicking this button or Command, Shift, and L. And we're going to type in image view, and then you're going to go ahead, click, and you're going to drag that into your view. Now, we're going to now add constraints to make this stick to all 4 edges. So make sure you've got the image view highlighted, go to Add New Constraints, and we're going to uncheck constraint to margins because we really want it to be edge to edge rather than being to the edge of the margins. And what we also want to do is for each of these 4 sides, we're going to click this little arrow and say that it's relative to the view rather than the safe area, because the safe area is a smaller space within your view that's guaranteed to not be obstructed by things like the notch and stuff like that. But we want the background really to go edge to edge, and we don't care if a bit of it is covered. So we're going to make this relative to the view, not the safe area. So for all of these, just pull it down, change it back to the view. Change this all to 0 because we want it edge to edge. And then let's click Add 4 Constraints. So you're going to see it like that. Now, If for some reason you did that incorrectly and your image view doesn't stretch side to side, that's not a problem. You can always, in the document outline here, go under constraints and you can just go ahead, highlight these four, delete it, and then try that again. All right, so click the image view now. Let's open up the inspector pane. It's Command Option 0 as the shortcut, or you can click this button there. Go ahead and go into the attribute inspector, and then we want to change the image attribute of that image view. We're going to set it to the background. Now it doesn't stretch. In Xcode 11, the default content mode is aspect fit, so it's going to fit the image into the size of your image view while maintaining the aspect ratio. I want it to fill up all the way, and so you can either choose scale to fill or aspect fill. But remember, scale to fill will actually distort and stretch the image. In this particular case, it's not a big deal. It's not like a face, or it's not like, you know, a pet or something like that, that it's going to look really weird if it's distorted. But I'm going to choose aspect fill anyway to maintain the aspect ratio while covering all of the area of my image view. So it's going to look like that. All right, now that we have our background done, it's time to think about how to lay out the cards. As you saw from the app preview, the cards are laid out in this sort of grid-like fashion. Well, UIKit actually has an element to display collections of data like that, in that sort of grid-like way. And that is called the collection view. So let's take a look at some examples of the collection view in action. If you've ever used an iPhone, you've probably used and seen a collection view before. Here are just a few examples of collection views. And if you ever used the Photos app, for example, on your phone, that is a collection view as well. Anytime you need to display a sort of grid-like layout of elements, then chances are the collection view is going to fit the bill. When you're using a collection view, the part I've highlighted on the screen is actually the whole entire collection view element. But each item inside the collection view is a cell. And that cell is basically just repeated for every single item that is in your collection. So for example, in our Match app, the collection view would also fill up the whole screen, but each cell would be one of the cards. So let's go back to Xcode now and let's add the collection view to our storyboard. So go ahead and open up your object library. Remember, that's Command Shift and L, or you can click this button here, and let's choose collection view. So you're going to get a bunch of different results. Make sure that you choose collection view and drag this element onto your storyboard. And then we're going to add some constraints for this guy. So highlight it, go add new constraints down here. But this time we're going to leave it by default constraint to margins because we don't want anything to cover up the cards. And we're going to leave it relative to the safe area. And it's set to that by default anyways. So go ahead and change these to 0. Add these 4 constraints and boom, we've got that. Now, before we move forward, why don't we just make one small tweak to this collection view, and that is to change the background to clear. Now, before you change it to clear, actually, I don't want you to change this property accidentally for another element. So I want you to make sure that in the document outline, you've got the collection view selected first. And then you can go down, scroll down to the background, and instead of the white default color, just choose clear color. All right. By default, the collection view also gives you one prototype cell. As you can see, this little square here. Also in the document outline, when you open this guy up, you'll see there's a collection view cell. And then if you open that guy up, there's a content view. So let me just take a moment to explain what this collection view cell is. Now this cell is called a prototype cell, and it represents a sort of template for all of your cells. We are going to design this template as a single card, and then this template is going to be used for every single card in our collection view. It's a little hard to work with being this little square, and so we're going to set the size of this cell so it's a little larger and kind of represents what size our card would be shown like. But just keep in mind that through code, programmatically, you can adjust the size of the cell after the fact. And so setting the cell here isn't kind of like an end-all be-all type of thing. So let's find out the size of our cards. Let's open up the file navigator. I've got it hidden here. You can also click this guy or just press Command 0 to open it up. Go to Assets, and then choose any one of the cards and choose the 1x version, not the 2x or 3x because those are 2 and 3 times larger. than the original size. So choose 1x and then go to this attribute inspector, scroll down, and you'll see that the image size is 158 by 224. So we're going to go ahead and set our cell to that size, 158 by 224. All right, so make sure you've got that cell selected, go into the size inspector, change the size from automatic to custom, and then we're just going to change that to 158 and 224. So now that more accurately represents what our cards are going to look like. You'll also notice that the CollectionView prototype cell contains a content view, and this is just a container view for all of the elements that we are going to put into this CollectionView cell. So what are we going to put in here? Well, I can tell you we're going to put an image view because we want to display the cards, right? So why don't we go ahead and open up our object library and choose image view. Now sometimes it's just easier to drag the element into the document outline rather than into the view itself. Sometimes if you're not accurate with where you're dropping that into the view, you could accidentally add it in a place that you didn't intend to. So I'm going to drag this image view element and I'm going to actually drag it inside the content view right there. So I can be sure that it's inside the content view. Look at how it's indented, and when you close the content view, it should tuck that image view back inside of it. Now, this being an Xcode beta, there is this visual glitch that exists here, and this might not exist for your version, but you can see that my image view is actually right here. You can see these handles that I can drag, that represents my image view, but this little gray image view label and square is all the way right here. So this guy is actually supposed to be right here. Anyways, that's fine. We're going to add some constraints to our image view now so that it fills up our card cell. So go ahead and highlight that image view, go to add new constraints, and we're just going to set all four sides to 0. And that will be unchecked, and there will be no safe area here because it's like a sub view and it's not on the main container view. So let's add those 4 constraints. You'll see that there it conforms to all sides, and this gray square is still here in the middle. Now this image view is going to display the back of the card or the front of the card. But the thing is, when the user taps on a card and we flip it over, if we only have one image view and we are changing that graphic image, it's going to be a sudden change, and it's going to be really hard to provide an animation to do a nice card flip. And so what I'm going to do is actually put 2 image views in here, one for the back of the card and one for the front of the card, and having those 2 image views kind of back to back, we're going to be able to do a nice card flip animation. So why don't we go ahead, we're going to add another image view, and make sure you drag that into the content view as well. And we're going to set the same constraints for that guy, just make it all 0s. And then you should have 2 image views inside that content view. When you collapse it, make sure that the image views are inside. Now I'm going to set one of them to the card back. And because I want to represent the card as being flipped over at first, I'm going to set this one that's lower as the card back. Because remember, the elements that are lower in the hierarchy are actually closer to the user. Now, again, this is that visual glitch I was telling you about. This card image should actually be right here. So in your version of Xcode, it might be okay. Now for this image view, I'm just going to set that to card 1. It doesn't really matter because the card back is covering it. Now the last thing we have to do before we end off this lesson is we have to specify what's called a reuse identifier for this cell. When you highlight this CollectionView cell and you look over here on the attribute inspector, you're going to see this reuse identifier. And what this is a way for you to refer to this cell, this template that you've designed with Swift code. So the reason this identifier exists is because for a single CollectionView element, you can actually have different types of cells. So, we've only designed one prototype cell here, but you could design 2 or 3 because your collection view might display different types of data. And for each different type of data, you want to use a different prototype cell. For us, even though we only have one prototype cell, or cell template, if you will, we still have to give it a reuse identifier because that's our way to reference it from the code. So I'm going to call this card cell. And that's going to be our reuse identifier for this cell template that we've designed. Now that's a great start to our card matching game. Let's recap what we've learned. In this lesson, you learned how to limit your app to a specific orientation. You also learned about the collection view and how to specify prototype cells. Now don't forget that you can always download my Xcode project below if you're not sure if what you've got is right. I highly recommend that you follow along and build this project on your own computer because that's really the best way to learn. All right, great progress. I'll see you in the next lesson.